One of the things my girlfriend and I really have in common is that we were deeply uncomfortable with and really rejected the culture we happened to be born into. And the cultures we were born into are on opposite sides of a border, but are very, very similar. So my girlfriend is from Detroit, Michigan, and I'm originally from Toronto, Canada. Now, the United States is a huge country. If my girlfriend had grown up in Texas, different kind of thing. But Detroit and Toronto, we really come from a similar background. And what makes it deeper is that we both really rejected and were profoundly uncomfortable with that cultural background. Let me ask you a question. Why was my own father a Canadian nationalist? Why did he like and support Canada so much? And if I had been born into some of the advantages in life, would my fealty have been kind of bought and sold? Would I have been way more positive about Canada? Or would you have been more positive about Detroit? So here's what raises that question for me. I found a really strange quotation from my father, and it was from 1967. I was thinking, okay, so how old was my father in 1967 when he said this? Okay. From a little biography, newspaper article about my father, it says, in 1967, he was chose to curate the History of Painting in Canada exhibition at Expo 67. So Expo is an international, it's paid for by the Canadian government, the party's a part of it, international exhibition. By then, he had already been a curator at the Vancouver Art Gallery and the New Brunswick Museum in St. John. My father had nothing but a BA. Those opportunities don't exist for our generation, for people like us anymore. With nothing but a BA, he had this and a BA in philosophy, not even a BA in art history or anything like this. He had a fabulous career handed to him by the Canadian establishment, despite the fact that he was a communist, despite the fact that he was an eccentric in so many obvious ways. He had opportunity after opportunity handed to him. And of course, the world was a different place, economically as well as politically, in the 1960s, right? Mm-hmm. Now, he was only 28 years old at that time. My girlfriend's 26. Yeah. He'd already had this fabulous career from the minute he finished his BA, right? Now, I mean, my mother was earning money. I mean, I'm not going to say she earned a fabulous wage. She was earning money writing for one of the biggest newspapers in Canada, I guess around the time she finished high school. But while she was a university student, she was getting paid real money to go and write articles for a newspaper. Again, yeah. It's not going to happen today. So, look, I mean...
Things are so much different now. I mean... You aren't expected to be able to graduate from high school and get a job like that.
Yeah. Ever.
Yeah.
Not at 26, not at 28, not at 36, not at 38.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is my point. I mean, in a sense, success can be corrosive. Failure can be corrosive, too. I really had to ask myself when I lived in a communist country, when I lived in Laos, because Laos did hand me certain opportunities, a certain level of comfort. Laos, by the way, was a grimy third world country at that time. When I arrived, there was literally not a single ATM in the whole country, not a single cash machine. Like the level of technology and comfort by first world standards was low. It was tough. There were stray dogs in the street everywhere. You get attacked by dogs. But that aside, nevertheless, okay, I was in a situation in Laos where it's like, if I sell out, if I just become pro-government and pro-establishment within this tiny third world country, I can have a certain level of income and a certain quality of life and a certain level of privilege. And I've probably told you this. At one point, my boss, who was a government official, a Communist Party official, he said to me, like, look, if you stick with this program, to some extent, you're above the law. Like, don't worry about it, even like, and he was saying it because the police would take people in and interrogate them to get bribes out of them or something. But like, look, even if you're put in prison, like, we'll get you out, kind of thing, and you're above the law here, okay? But like I remember thinking like, no, like even if they paid me 10 times as much or 100 times more, like even if this was real money, even if this was real luxury, like I could never be kind of a pro. I can't be a pro-establishment person. I can't be a nationalist for Laos, even to put it that way, more vaguely. And I felt I couldn't be for any country. Like maybe even if you imagine like Dubai or something. I know a lot of white guys go to Dubai, teach English or get a position, get a good career going. But I felt for me that was because like my capacity to be a conformist was already shattered by the negative experience in Canada. You know what I mean? Like my experience in Canada is so negative, it didn't just turn me against being a conformist and nationalist, being pro-establishment in Canada, but it kind of soured me on that or made it impossible for me to conform anywhere in Laos or in Dubai, you know? And maybe I'm wrong, right? But like my point is for people like my father, and it's got to be true for some people in current generation. I think it's true. See, I don't know if you know any of these guys. Do you know any young white men who became like successful computer programmers at an early age, back during the tech boom? You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean? Like maybe they just finished high school and then went straight into doing computer programming and making a lot of money. Or maybe a lot of time it's like they did 2 years of university, but then they were making so much money in computer programming or making websites for the internet. You know what? I don't know if you know the kind of guy.
My ex-boyfriend's father, who I only met a couple times, had no university education, but he has been able to, you know, he didn't have an easy life. He initially was working as a chef for many years, and then he got into computer programming. And he made I don't even know what it was, but he made something that earned him a ton of money, and he was able to buy this nice place in Florida and basically have an early retirement, and he's just living off of those savings. So, yeah, in effect, he got lucky at the time that he got involved in what program he created. So, yeah, you know,
I think so. I mean, especially if that kind of success comes young, I think a lot of the time that fosters pro-establishment, pro-conformist attitudes, whether or not they're nationalist attitudes. We're like, this is all it is. Ultimately, it's this shallow. It creates the feeling that this whole society is working because it's working for you, because it's giving positive opportunities for you.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know? Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, I know.
So I don't know if he was like that, your boyfriend. I don't know. I mean, you know,
yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think it's also with what the economic opportunities for my own father also have made him feel this way. But he recognizes how difficult it is for people my age. Well, you know, neither of my brothers stayed in Michigan.
And this is Detroit. So just to be clear, Detroit is an economic disaster. I mean, it's especially tough in Detroit.
Yeah, neither of my brothers were able. They didn't want to stay in Michigan. There were no opportunities. So of course they moved all the way across the country because of this. Even though they had very marketable degrees. So, you know, I think he realizes the devastation of this actual city and also around the country in the areas surrounding Detroit as well. Just a lot of lost economic vibrancy. And how that impacts everything. How it's, I mean, maybe my mind is just on this for whatever reason, but I mean, you know, many of my father's friends graduated from high school and were able to get married, have kids, and
own a home.
Have a home, have a steady job. Then, you know, you were able to start this life right out of high school. I mean, it's something that my generation didn't have.
Well, for my father's generation specifically, university tuition, not even $500. That's huge.
I saw the transcripts or, you know, the receipts from my mom got an education at the same university I went to. It was so much cheaper. It had gone up by like 40 times, basically, you know, like.
Well, there's the cost, but then there's the value of the diploma when you finished it. I mean, so for my father in the 1960s, having a BA actually opened doors for him. And for me, you know, any job I apply, you have a bachelor's degree and like, and what? You know, it's now
extraordinary in order to be
in order to get a terrible job.
Yeah.
I mean, not even a job you know. Anyway. Yeah, anyway, and I do have extraordinary things about me.
Yes.
But in Canada, there's certainly no opportunity for me. But look, you know, I feel what dissatisfies me about Canada, politically and culturally, is profound and important and real. I don't feel that it's in any way like resentment over the fact that I didn't have the kinds of opportunities my father had, right? But like, in a sense, what I'm doing here is challenging myself, because I'm also acknowledging, like, okay, well, what if Canadian society or any society offered me the kind of unbelievable upward social mobility my father was offered, right, which you say also includes elements like a home, you know, education, social status, income, home ownership. You know, it's a joke today. Even if you're really quite successful as a young person living in Vancouver today, as an example.
Vancouver, Canada, yeah.
You can never own a home.
No.
What are you joking?
The huge metropolises of America, neither...
All your income is just going to go into rent. You're going to be a rent slave your whole life, even if you really have quite a good job. Let's say you become a dental hygienist. You know, it's a high-paid job, boring, repetitive job. But what do you think? You can buy a house in Vancouver, buy a condo in Vancouver? Maybe, you know, anyway, if it's, you know, lifelong, your only priority, you know, whatever, you know. So, I mean, the problem here isn't really poverty. The problem is opportunity and lack of opportunity. But like, what I'm saying and challenging myself and challenging the audience is, to what extent do you feel your critique of the society you're born into, or even the society you choose to move to what extent is that really motivated by a kind of resentment and hopelessness, or the opposite, or opportunity and hope that you happen to have handed to you by these circumstances? I want to stay for this on 1 second. So, you know, my ex-wife's father, he was part of this golden generation of computer programmers where nobody needed a bachelor's degree. There was so much demand. There were so few people who were competent at doing computer programming that whatever, straight out of high school, all kinds of people were successful, made a lot of money. And I had one friend who was really in the last period, what we normally call kind of the internet boom. The last period where people get ahead with no BA and really make a lot of money. And then I saw that disappear, where those, and with both those people, my ex-wife's father and this young man I met in Asia. So he was a young white guy from Australia, and he got money fast without getting a BA, and he started getting corrupted by the lifestyle that he could afford himself as a computer programmer traveling around Asia, where the cost of living was even lower. So he's earning Australian dollars, and he's vacationing in the Philippines and Thailand, and then China. China became more and more part of his life. I mean, look, it's so fundamentally stupid to say, well, I own a gold mine. I'm making lots of money. So all of society is doing fine. The system works. And, like, you know, obviously I'm using the gold mine as a ridiculous example, but it's true. When I lived in Laos, by the way, the single biggest company, the single biggest employer was literally a gold mine. The economy really hinged on this one company doing gold mining. Some people are literally gold miners or are investors and executives in gold mining companies. So it's a real example. But what a ridiculous delusion to think this society works or this nation is good or to have these other things. And likewise, I mean, the thing is, computer programming is like a gold mine in one sense, in that there's this fleeting period of opportunity. That gold mine in Laos, there's about 5 good years. And guess what? You run out of gold, right?
Yeah.
Gold's not. There was this period of time when there was easy money in computer programming. And, you know, it's if you talk to young people in computer programming today, even in Silicon Valley and stuff, it's like, well, you know, it's not minimum wage, but no one would say today it's an easy way to make a living. So what? So now that the gold is gone to the gold, so now do you sympathize with the people who are literally on the street or the people who are struggling to survive? So now do you have some kind of criticism of society? And again, a lot of this comes back to the educational establishment people bankrupting themselves to get a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
And then doing what after that,
Yeah.
I have the delusion that my critique of Canadian society is not based on that kind of personal economic perspective or experience. I think it's real, but
I also have that delusion, as you know, this is something that we connect on. There are reasons why the economic opportunities aren't so great in where I grew up, but part of it is North America was this land of opportunity for colonists, and you got to see how the culture. There's so many things that I don't like about American culture, but part of it is that it's a result of colonization. You've talked about as we've been going around Taiwan, how the actual buildings were put up with such speed, and they wanted to build as fast as possible. We just went to the port city of Geelong, and got to see how it's been run down after this initial period of economic opportunity and optimism, and that to me mirrors Detroit and many of the surrounding cities, maybe like Columbus or different places in Ohio, Illinois. At one point these tons of structures were put up, and there's going to be so much opportunity here. And in the Detroit area, it was car manufacturing. Now that's no longer something that's no longer an actual opportunity. What is there? It's like you say with the gold mine. There was this gold rush in Detroit, and then now there's what is there to hold on to? And I remember we had this discussion. Sorry if I'm just trying to form my thoughts here, but when we were in Brussels, I remember we were walking around and you were talking about Europeans tend to be more care about their hometown. And you're making this connection between Europeans who even though their hometown isn't a very economically vital place, they still feel some connection to it. This is actually my ancestral home. This is what I want to hold on to and maintain the traditions of. But what is there in Michigan for my family? I mean, originally,
as soon as the factory closes or something, what are you trying to build there? What's the connection? There was an economic opportunity, but then when that's gone, what's the meaningful connection? What is it you're trying to build in that town? Unlike someone whose whole family is from a certain town in Switzerland or Iceland. Hey, we have 1,000 years of heritage here, and we're trying to build on it.
My great-grandparents grew up here. Well, my great-grandparents grew up across the ocean in Norway, England, Germany. I mean, what connection do I really have to Michigan other than it's a similar crabby climate to some places that my relatives were from. I mean, you don't have this deep connection to the land, unlike,
or any institutions or something.
Right, and it's sad because I know the reason why I'm there is because of this opportunity from wiping out the native people. I mean, the native people actually have this connection to their land, and it's now gone because it's all been ruined by white people coming in and changing the landscape completely, changing the natural landscape too. I mean, it's not just cities going up. It's deforestation, changing of actual waterways, and how dams and rivers and everything's structured. So I mean, I'm just kind of saying what is there holding people to North America now if it's not an ancestral homeland, if there's no real, if the gold mine has been deprived or depleted of its gold, what is there now?
Well, so I just say real bit again, Melissa and I have all this stuff in common, but Toronto, downtown Toronto, I didn't come from one of the suburbs. I was walking distance from the banking district. I was really downtown. I was walking distance from Parliament and University campus. I walked everywhere in downtown Toronto. I'm not from the suburbs. In downtown Toronto, everyone was just there to make money and get out. And you felt like you were in a place that had this kind of merely economically instrumental value, that it had no meaning in itself. And on the contrary, it was very common to hear people say about Toronto, they were going to get out as soon as they could. They were going to move back to Whistler, British Columbia, or the East Coast, or as soon as they get this money, they're out. And it's interesting. I don't know if people still feel that way about Toronto today, but it was seen as this kind of dark, bleak, awful city. Get your money and get out. And anyway, regardless of whether or not individuals feel that way about Detroit. So look, right now we're having this conversation in Taiwan. And Taiwan is basically in a period of economic boom. There's basically zero unemployment here. We're in an industrious steel manufacturing town. We're actually in an industrial district. We walk past huge factories and smokestacks every day here. This is the opposite extreme from Detroit. Detroit is a landscape of empty and abandoned factories. And this is, this is an economically and industrially booming place. And Taiwan, this is more parallel to what I was saying about Laos before. It offers you, Melissa, a certain level of, economic. Yeah, okay, that's a good way to put it. It offers you a middle class quality of life if you'll just sign up for it, if you'll just conform. Again, we're both just kind of too old to get swept up in this. My girlfriend is 26. It's not that young. It's really not. Everyone thinks my girlfriend's young compared to me, but 26 is already old. She's already burdened with a lot of the, sorrows of life. But, we're not swept up in this like, oh, Taiwan's the most wonderful place or something. We're not becoming nationalists or enthusiasts or uncritical supporters of Taiwan just because it offers us that. And I think we're both very skeptical about the nature of the opportunity, and we're both skeptical about what we'll lose if we sell out and take that opportunity and commit to it. But no one's offering me a position as a fucking museum curator.
Right.
And these were really elite positions being offered to my father. We had nothing but a BA in philosophy. And he published insane articles in communist magazines and newspapers. So I was just looking it up. It's stuff's on the internet now. A lot of it's been digitized. Whoa, the level of privilege and opportunity that was handed to him. And he was offered scholarships to get a PhD and all this stuff. He was offered all these opportunities as a young man that he very much took for granted. Yeah. And in some ways, of course, in his own mind, he thought, he became a rebel. As a communist extremist, he thought of himself as a revolutionary. But in so many ways, he sold out. He absolutely became part of the Canadian establishment, not even the middle class establishment. Stretching the meaning of middle class here. He became part of the upper middle class establishment, shall we say. And he really did become a nationalist and this kind of pro-Canadian demagogue and so on. That's what he was all about. So look, that's it. This video has already gone on long enough. For me, it's just a reminder about the riddle of how economic opportunity and, maybe resentment about lack of economic opportunity can be profoundly linked to what you perceive as, your political identity. And the ethical objections and the ethical motivations that shape your political identity.